high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and heart disease. So it's very low sodium and very low fat. Some of you who are not used to such a low sodium diet might find the recipes aren't very palatable. But like I said, try it the first time the way it says, and then you can always add to it afterwards. You can add your own seasonings. I wouldn't add too much more salt, but you can always add to it afterwards. Now the first part of this recipe that we're about to do calls for 3 cups of water to be boiled. So what you would do is go ahead and add the water to your pot. This is what you would do at your cooking school. This is 3 cups of water. This is what I used to do beforehand. I'll tell you what I do now. You add your water and you add all the seasonings to the pot. Then you take the pot back to the kitchen and you boil it. You boil the water and the seasonings because you need to boil it for about 3 minutes. Let it simmer for about 3 minutes. This is how I used to do it beforehand. Now, I actually bought a skillet. The one you can plug in and cook everything right there in front of everybody. And it's kind of not like a bowl, but it has those edges, the sides that come up. So I can cook my burgers in there. So if you don't have a skillet, do it this way. Put your water in your pot, add your seasonings, and then you're gonna have to find the kitchen, take it back to the kitchen, let it boil and simmer for 3 minutes. So that's what we're going to do today because I don't have my skillet with me. But I would recommend, if this is something that you're going to do, invest in a good blender, and my suggestion is a Vitamix, and invest in a skillet. That'll make it a lot easier for you when you're doing your cooking. Okay? So the first ingredient is 3 cups of water, which my mom already added. And then the next thing we're going to add is 1/4 cup of Bragg's liquid aminos. Now you might see that these ingredients are a little bit more than what it calls for. That's because I doubled the recipe so everybody could get some burgers tomorrow. The next ingredient is 1 tablespoon of beef-like seasoning. We don't have a beef-like seasoning here, but I'm going to explain to you what I do to make my own beef-like seasoning. I use Tasty Vegan Delights, and there's a chicken-like seasoning in this cookbook, and it's on page, I believe it's 90, page 90. Let me make sure. Yes. It's actually called the mock chicken seasoning on page 90 of Tasty Vegan Delight. To make the beef-like seasoning, the first ingredient on the chicken style seasoning, mock chicken seasoning, is 1 cup of nutritional yeast flakes. Take that out. Take out the nutritional yeast flakes and add 1 cup, replace it with 1 cup of browned whole grain flour. It can be whole wheat, it can be spelt. I haven't tried millet or any other grain. I've tried whole wheat and spelt. Have you tried any other grain? Okay, so whole wheat or spelt. You just brown it on, and most of you know how to brown flour because we've done that when we were younger. Just brown it. It'll turn. It'll get a little darker. It'll get a little. I really wanted to say most of you did it when you were in the islands because I know that's what we did when I was growing up. You just brown it, let it get a little darker, and use 1 cup of that in place of the 1 cup of nutritional yeast flakes. Everything else stays the same. All the other ingredients stays exactly the same exact amount. You mix that up together, and you have your beef-like seasoning. It's not salty, so you would have to, when you're doing your recipes, maybe add a little bit more salt if you need to, but this one doesn't have any salt in it. Question?
Why would you replace the nutritional yeast?
Because the nutritional yeast flakes, for the mock chicken seasoning, gives it a chicken's-like color. The brown flour gives it a beef-like color. So you want to get that color in it. Yeah, you want to get that color in it. Okay, so for the beef-like seasoning, use the recipe for the mock chicken seasoning and replace the 1 cup of nutritional yeast flakes with 1 cup of browned whole grain flour. Okay, not white flour, it has to be whole grain flour. Okay, back to our recipe. So we don't have that one right here, but we're going to move on to the next one. The next ingredient is 1 teaspoon of Wright's hickory seasoning. That's optional. That'll give the burger a smoky kind of taste. So we normally leave that out. And what my suggestion is always when you're doing your cooking school, keep everything pretty simple. If there's an ingredient that is not quite easy to get, because a lot of people that are changing their lifestyle, they want to be able to go to the store and buy everything. Not necessarily have to run to this health food store and that health food store. So if there's something that you could do without in a recipe, leave it out until you can maybe kind of get them more into shopping at other places. So I always leave the rice hickory seasoning out, and I add everything else. The next one is 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. A half teaspoon of salt. 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast flakes. Now it calls for a 1/4 cup of dried onion flakes or 1 medium onion diced. And if you can opt for fresh, if you can get fresh, use the fresh instead. Okay, so in this particular case, I added the fresh onions. If it calls for onion powder like a little bit, use that. But if it's asking you to choose between onion flakes and fresh onions, go for fresh. And these are the last 2 ingredients that we're going to add afterwards. But my mom is going to take that back. She's going to get it simmered. She's going to bring it out, and then we're going to add the last 2 ingredients to it. The last 2 ingredients are our oats and the walnuts. Now it calls for 3 cups of quick oats. You can use the quick oats, you can use the rolled oats. You can use either one, because actually quick oats is just the rolled oats cut up smaller. So you can put the rolled oats in a blender and make it smaller if you want to, or you can just leave them big. It kind of depends on how you like your burger to look. It doesn't really make a difference in the taste whatsoever. The only fat, the only oil in this recipe is the 1/2 cup of nuts. You can use walnuts or you can use pecans. I used walnuts in this recipe, and since I doubled it, it's actually a cup of the walnuts grounded up. Another thing that you're probably going to have to get is a food processor or a chopper, because you can do this in a chopper. And you can chop your onions and your garlic and whatnot in a chopper also. But once you have the chopper, you can do your nuts in it. You can also make your breadcrumbs in a food processor or a chopper. And most people have stuff like that at home. So for the most part, it's not having to go out and buy all this stuff, but just use what you have and try to work with that. So we have our 1/2 cup, which is 1 cup since we doubled the recipe of the nuts. That's the only fat, the only oil in this recipe. These burgers are the best that I have tried. I've tried a lot of other different burger recipes in the past, and they call for so much oil, and they don't hold together as well, and they don't taste as good. These burgers, we've traveled with them to California, up here. I brought some with me the other day when I came here. They travel really well. They don't fall apart as easily. They hold together real well. And they're pretty, I guess the word I'm looking for is durable, because they're not going to break apart as easy. But you can also use these burgers if you want to make a pasta sauce or, a pasta sauce. You can crumble them up and put them in your pasta sauce and pour them over your spaghetti. You can use them in a recipe that might call for a ground beef. You can also put them in a recipe that just crush it up, ground it up. You're going to have to grind it up because it doesn't ground up real easily, and put it in recipes like that. So this recipe, I would highly recommend you using this oat burger recipe for starting off with the cooking school, because it's very easy to do. It's not expensive because, well, the oats are pretty cheap. The walnuts or the pecans might be a little bit more pricey, but it's only a 1/2 cup. Everything else you probably have already in your cupboard. So this is one recipe I would suggest you use it. And it's very tasty. So people like it, and they always come back for more. Okay? So that's our oat burger recipe. Now, another one of the things that I tell people when they're planning their own cooking school, I told you guys about putting everything in a baggie when you're traveling. Make sure when you put it in the baggie, you just put that one recipe that you're going to prep. Okay? If you're going to make more while you're there to serve them, you can always prep the others in some more baggies. But for your demo, just put the one recipe in the baggies. And what I do is, for the salts and the seasoning, the basil, oregano, whatnot, I put it in the snack size baggies. I don't know if you guys have seen those. Mm-hmm. I put those in the snack size baggie. If I have a cup of something or 2 cups, I'll put it in the quart size baggie. And then I'll stick everything into a gallon, or if it's a bigger recipe, I'll stick it into a 2-gallon baggie. And I'll write on top of the baggie, oat burger recipe, or mac and cheese, or whatever. So you have all of that in that one baggie.
question. One quick item, because we used to do this quite a bit in our demonstrations. Is because of the time that it takes to cook and get it all, mixed up and stuff like that, and simmered. What you can do when you're preparing the burgers for the people, before you take that burger and you make your burger, just take out a little bit of batch of that little batter, put it in a Ziploc, because it's going to take, as you see, it's going to take a little bit of time there. Have a little bit of that wet batter, and then when you come back out to display it, or when you don't, you just say, hey, you guys follow the recipe or whatever like that. This is how it should come out.
Yeah.
And then you have, as Erica will show you, then you could do the demonstration or whatever like that. It's just that time in between was killing us. But if you're a professional, you have a lot to say, then it's not a problem. It's the easiest thing. But usually I would grab a little batch out, have it ready, just waiting from the other burgers, and then when we're ready to go, then you just demonstrate that. So it could be like that. So. Cool.
And this is, thank you, Nice. This is Nice Collins. He does the same thing we do, so he knows too. This is his life, just like it is us. Yes, this is Nice Collins.
Okay, nice to meet you, Nice.
Thank you so much for that.
All right.
Okay, so remember when you're traveling to always mark on the baggie what it is, because a lot of times we've gone to places and onion powder and garlic powder looks alike. If you don't put the name on it, you might not know which is which. So always write on it. The Italian seasoning and basil, they kind of all look alike. So always get a marker, write it right on the baggie, whatever it is, okay? So you don't get confused when you get there, okay? Now our next recipe, I kind of explained that before. I explained that until we get the rest of this one out. Okay, this recipe is actually one that you guys have had last week. I'm gonna make the simple mayonnaise, and I think you used it as a salad dressing. We used it as a salad dressing. The white cream salad dressing that you have that's really good is actually a mayonnaise recipe, and it's the best mayonnaise recipe, vegan, total vegetarian recipe that I've found. I've tried a lot of other ones, but this one is the best. It's pretty thick, it's very tasty, and it has 5 ingredients. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ingredients. Pretty simple to make. So we use it as a salad dressing when we do our cooking schools because people enjoyed it. So we just use it as a salad dressing for those recipes. Now I'm going to make that recipe next, but I'm actually making a minced onion dressing recipe. And with this one, there's just a few more ingredients that you add to the simple mayonnaise recipe, and you have a whole new recipe. So when you have different items, if you can make 1 or 2 recipes from one recipe, go ahead and do it. Like with this one, you can show them how to make the simple mayonnaise recipe, and then you can move on and show them how to make a minced onion dressing recipe. So you have 2 recipes with 1. Okay, you kind of get that? So it gives them more choices. It gives them more choices, more things to choose from. Before we use that simple mayonnaise recipe, we used to use a recipe from Tasty Vegan Delight. It was a tofu mayonnaise recipe. Now that one was a little more liquidy. It wasn't as thick, and I think the one in 7 Secrets, the one that we're making, the simple mayonnaise recipe that you guys had, that one actually tastes better. That one tastes better. So as soon as my mom gets back, we're going to finish this, and then we're going to move on to the minced onion dressing recipe. And what I like to do, like I said, I try to keep everything as one meal. I try to make something for a salad dressing, like the mayo or the minced onion dressing recipe. I try to make an entree, a carbohydrate portion, and I try to do a dessert. I don't always get to the dessert, but people like that, especially if somebody's changing their diet. They might be thinking, oh, I have to give up sweets completely. It's going to be so bland. My diet's going to be boring. But you really don't. Not if you choose the right forms. Now, I'm not advocating going out there and having sugar. We do use honey or agave nectar. We also use maple syrup, brown rice syrup. Those are our sweeteners. But we don't use them all the time. We don't have them every day. And Carob Chips has a barley malt sweetener in it, and that's what we're gonna make for our dessert recipe. We're gonna make a carob chip cookie, and that one has a barley malt sweetener in it, so you don't need to add any other sweetener in it. But I try to do a dessert at the end of my cooking school. That way they can get something tasty as the last thing in their mouth, and that way they know, hey, well, this is good because I can have my sweet also. You don't have to do it, but it's a good idea too, so that people know there is some variety.